I was at the Republican convention in Cleveland last July, and when they introduced Donald Trump for his big moment at the podium, they called him America's blue-collar billionaire. Yeah. What Mr. Kemper was saying about Steve Bannon and his rhetoric is exactly the case. These guys constantly pretend to care about middle Americans who have been ruined by, the last economic downturn, 30 years of growing inequality. Trump's speech at the Republican convention, for example, this was his greatest moment. The Republican convention was kind of a botch. I mean, I was there. It was a disaster. Everything went wrong, nothing worked. But Trump did a good job. He had actually rehearsed his talk, unusual for him, right? And he had actually rehearsed his talk, and he really meant to do a good job, and he did deliver. It was his high point of his campaign. And in his speech, he pledged himself to the working class voters left behind by the current recovery. And this is what he said: "I have visited the laid off factory workers and the communities crushed by our horrible and unfair trade deals." Now this next phrase is an exact echo of Franklin Roosevelt. "These are the forgotten men and women of our country, people who work hard but no longer have a voice." It's Trump saying that. Then he goes on and tries to reverse the traditional liberal criticism of conservatives as being puppets of the billionaire class, the Koch brothers and all that sort of thing. This is what Trump said: "Big business, elite media, and major donors are lining up behind the campaign of my opponent because they know she will keep our rigged system in place." Rigged system, he stole that, of course, from Elizabeth Warren. He goes on. Trump says, "They are throwing money at her," meaning Hillary, "because they have total control over every single thing she does. She is their puppet, and they pull the strings." You see what I'm getting at here, folks? Now, Donald Trump is a hypocrite and a vulgarian and a bigot. But when he said those things, he connected with people emotionally. When he said that the system is rigged, he's right. It is. When he said that huge parts of this country have been deindustrialized and that's a bad thing, yeah, he's right about that. And Democrats are always saying, "Oh, nothing you can do about that. That's globalization." And here's Trump saying, "No, we can do something about it." He has no idea what. Not a clue. Here's what drives me crazy, folks. Everything that he said in that speech, those are things that my side used to say. That's things that my team used to, that's how we used to talk. So where are the Democrats in all of this? Look, water. You know this. If you're as old as me, you remember that once upon a time, protecting the middle class society is what the Democratic Party was all about. This was the primary mission, and they never shut up about it. They reminded you of this every chance they got. And I can't help but think that if you take certain Democratic leaders of the past, and I know they all had their problems, but if you take someone like Franklin Roosevelt or Harry Truman, Lyndon Johnson, Hubert Humphrey, and you put them in today's situation, they would know exactly what to do about it. They would take one look at what Wall Street is doing to this country and doing to the world, and they would swing directly into action. But many of our modern Democratic leaders falter. They acknowledge that inequality is rampant and it's an awful thing, and they cry big, hot tears about it. But they cannot find the conviction or the imagination to do what is necessary to put this thing into reverse. And instead, they offer us the same high-minded policy platitudes that they have been dishing up since the 1980s. And they tell us, "Oh, dude, there's nothing anybody can do about technology, right? Nothing you can do about that. There's nothing anybody can do about globalization, right? Oh, no, not globalize. That is the hand of the Almighty, the invisible hand of God Himself, reaching down into human affairs and rearranging our lives just however He sees fit. Nothing we can do about globalization, right?" And so you know what they do. They offer us charter schools and job training. And yeah, they'll shovel out the student loans, right? But other than that, folks, they have got nothing. The example I want to focus on, the failure I want to focus on, is also from 2009. Like I said, I think that's the turning point for us. 2009, the same year the pundits were declaring the Republican Party to be dead. The issue is the Wall Street bailouts. This, I think, was the historical inflection point where our country and the entire world could have changed course. But we didn't do it. This was the turning point, folks, and we missed the turn. I want you to try to remember what it was like. Barack Obama was elected, had just been elected president in a tremendous wave of hope and enthusiasm, and I was one of the hopeful ones. And do you remember the rally he had here in Kansas City? Hundreds of thousands of people. The world believed in this man. The country believed in this man. And then he proceeded to continue the bailout policies of George W. Bush, essentially unchanged. No big banks got put into receivership. By the way, they put banks out of business in Kansas City all the time. It happens all the time, all over this country. But not Citibank, not JP Morgan. Oh, no, 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 no. No bailouts got unwound. No elite bankers got prosecuted. Hell, they didn't even get fired. Obama did fire the CEO of General Motors. I thought he deserved it. I thought that was a good move. But no, 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 not those guys at Wells Fargo. Not the guys at Goldman. Of course not. Obama and his Democratic team refused to change course, folks, when every sign was telling them it was time to turn, when it would have been good for this country to turn, I mean healthy for this country to do something about financialization, when it was fully within their power at the time to make that turn. It's not anymore, by the way, but it was then because of the bailouts, when it would have been overwhelmingly popular to make that change. And lastly, when the country fully expected the president to turn. And when I say the country, I mean the Wall Street bankers themselves. Do you remember this moment almost exactly 8 years ago to the day? Barack Obama was brand new president, and he had the leaders of the Wall Street banks down to the White House, and they come down from Manhattan to Washington, and they go into their meeting with the president. And they're on their, and this is all on film, of course, and not the meeting itself, but them walking into the White House. And as they're walking in, you look at their faces, and they are ashen-faced because they know what's going to happen to them. He's going to pull a Franklin Roosevelt on them. He's going to give these guys a spanking, right? No. They come out 2 hours later, all smiles. They step up to the microphones, nothing changed. Instead, we foamed the runways for these guys, in the immortal phrase of Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner. We foamed the runway for these guys. Why? I want to get one thing out of the way really quickly. Barack Obama did not play the greatest issue of our time the way he did because the working class rose up to defend its pals on Wall Street. That is not what happened. He didn't do it the way he did because the presidency lacks sufficient power. The presidency, folks, is an enormously powerful office, as we are reminded every single day right now when we open up the newspaper in the morning and see what outrage Trump has committed overnight. What I want to suggest is that Barack Obama played this issue the way he did back in 2009 because that's how he wanted to play it. And we have to get our heads around that if we want to understand what has gone wrong with the Democratic Party. But in truth, saying that just pushes the problem back a step. Okay, why did he want to do it that way? And in truth, this doesn't start with Barack Obama. You want to understand why he acted the way he did, you have to go back to the 70s, the 80s, the 1990s. You have to do a little bit of digging in Democratic Party history. And back in those days, when I was young, the Democratic Party was engaged in a kind of civil war over who they were and what they stood for. And there were all these different factions in the Democratic Party back then, and they fought like cats and dogs. But there was one thing that they all agreed on. They fought over every imaginable thing, but they all came together around one issue, and that was that the Democrats had to turn away from the legacy of the New Deal with its fixation on working class people. Everything else was up for grabs, but that, they were absolutely certain about that. Had to turn away from the New Deal. And what Democrats had to embrace instead, they said, was the emerging post-industrial economy. And the people, and this is fascinating, folks, the people that the Democratic Party needed to identify itself with were the winners in this new economic order. The highly educated professionals who populate our innovative knowledge industries. And you know what I mean by professionals? The sort of classic professions, lawyers, doctors, clergy, architects, engineers, that sort of thing. These days, though, it's an enormous category. It includes everyone, basically everyone with an advanced degree. So I'm part of this group. PhDs who write derivative securities, mathematicians, biochemists who make prescription drugs. Fascinating thing about the professional class. As a demographic group, back in the 1950s, they were one of the most Republican groups in society, professionals were. By the 1990s, they completely changed sides, and they're one of the most democratic groups in the country. And the Democratic Party itself has gone with them. And that's who the Democratic Party is today. They are a class party. They're the party of a class, like in the 19th century in France or Austria or something like that. They're the party of a class, it's just not the working class. They're the party of highly educated professionals. Now we know the Democrats have many other constituent groups, of course, minorities, women, and the young, among many others. But professionals are the ones who come first. They're the ones who sit in the front seat. They're the ones with their hands on the steering wheel, and the rest of us ride in back. It is the tastes and manners of the professional class that are always celebrated by liberal newspapers. You know. Okay, I need to stop talking about this. The foodie stuff, artisanal stuff, craft cocktails. Jesus Christ. Look, American liberalism started out in the 19th century as a populist movement. No question about that. But today it is something very, very different. It is a movement of the winners and the highly credentialed. Now, liberals have generated all of these flattering, these wonderful phrases to describe their favorite demographic group, the professional class, these terms of endearment. They call them the wired workers who will inherit the future. They're supposed to be a learning class that truly gets the power of education. And of course, they are a creative class. You're familiar with this one, right? You've heard the creative class. Think about that for a second. Creativity is the property of a class. It's the property of a really wealthy, high-achieving class. Isn't that just a beautiful thought? Furthermore, you have to organize your city around the needs and tastes and desires of this class. You have to write trade deals to make this class happy, or otherwise they'll move to like Denmark or something. You know, you got to bow down before the creative class. Sorry. And but by creative class, of course, I mean the same thing. It's always the professional class. And Democratic leaders, the leaders of the party are, of course, always drawn from the same group. You think about the life story of Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton. It has a very similar trajectory. All three of them were plucked from these obscure lives by a fancy school. Bill Clinton is this kid and teenager in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And he goes to Georgetown University. He becomes a Rhodes Scholar. He goes to Yale Law School. And the doors of the world open up for him. And you look at the people that advise all three of these leading Democrats, and it's always these Ivy League people. The Washington Post used to periodically run these stories, marveling at Barack Obama's inner circle of advisors. You know, they weren't just Ivy Leaguers. They all were from one institution. They all had some association with Harvard. Hell, he had the president of Harvard University advising him, Larry Summers, right? But then there are a handful that didn't have any connection with Harvard, and they had all gone to Oxford, you know, in England. So this is the Democratic Party idea. Professionals are the heroes of history. Do you remember in Marx, it is the proletariat. This idea that you have at the end of history, this one class of people stands as the winners, the victors of history at the end of this dialectic. And for Marx, of course, it's the proletariat. But for the Democrats, they have a kind of similar theory, and the winner is the creative class. That's who stands at the end of this great dialectic of creativity and innovation. And this also happens to be the #1 constituency of the Democratic Party. And of course, the leaders of the party are always drawn from this exact same group. Do you see what I'm getting at here, folks? What I'm describing is a long-term shift of allegiance from the middle class, the working class, to professionals. And this explains everything, or really close to, well, hell, if you ask me, everything, every last little goddamn thing. This explains everything about the Democratic Party that is frustrating and disappointing and irritating and drives you absolutely crazy. Everything. I mean, how do you get a situation like we're in right now, where inequality is out of control, where we are headed back to a 19th century pattern of wealth distribution? Headed there. Hell, we are there, folks. The 19th century actually looks pretty damn good. Inequality is out of control, and the party of the left can't take advantage of this situation. How does that happen? How do you get in a situation like this where the middle class is disintegrating and the party of the left is in a state of historic defeat, where the middle class is coming apart and people are turning to a mountebank like Donald Trump, to solve their problems for them? This is only possible, folks, when the party of the left, and that's what the Democrats are in our system, this is only possible when the party of the left is not interested in its historic mission. That's the only way you get this combination of inequality and defeat. Why aren't they interested? Let's go back to that problem of the Democrats and the Wall Street banks. Why did the Democratic team back in 2009 fail to do what obviously needed to be done with the Wall Street banks? Why did they declare that Wall Street executives were going to be held to a different legal standard than ordinary criminals? And they did declare this. The guy who said it was a high official at the Justice Department. He had to resign as soon as it became public knowledge. But he said it, folks. Why did this administration choose Wall Street over average people again and again and again and again? Why? Because for the achievement-conscious people who made up the upper echelons of the administration, investment bankers were more than friends. These people were classmates. These people were peers. Hell, these people are the face in the mirror. The two groups are, you look at the Treasury Department and you look at investment bankers in New York, and they are demographically identical. They are the same. The Justice Department, J.P. Morgan. People go back and forth through the revolving door, and there is no difference. There is no change. The Democrats look at Wall Street and they see an industry filled with people of subtle minds and extraordinary innovation and sophisticated jargon. God, they love that jargon. Do you know what I'm talking about? So Wall Street made up a bogus professional jargon in order to shield themselves from outside scrutiny. Professions always do that, but in the case of Wall Street, it's complete bullshit, right? You know what I'm talking about? And the Democrats are like, dude, that's so sophisticated. Right? They look at Wall Street and they see financial wizards who are plucking wealth out of thin air, making these financial instruments that are so admirably complex, right? Slicing and dicing risk until it doesn't exist anymore. It's like financial rocket science, as one administration official said. And by the way, he said that as a way of explaining why they weren't prosecuting these guys. Financial rocket science. Dude, it's so complexity, no one understands it. It is exactly the same for Big Pharma, of course. So innovative. You can't import generic pharmaceuticals from India or Canada. No. You have to protect these innovative companies. You have to protect Pfizer. And folks, mega dittos for Silicon Valley, an industry that can do no wrong in Democratic eyes. I mean, so lovable, Mark Zuckerberg. So professional, ooh, Eric Schmidt. so creative, ooh, Jeff Bezos, that for this one industry, enforcement of our country's antitrust laws was basically suspended, just for this one industry. What does a party of the professional class believe in? The most important, you know the answer to this, it is meritocracy. Of course, the number one item on the list is meritocracy, the idea that the successful deserve their rewards, and that the people on top in our society are up there because, God damn it, they are the best. This is the first commandment of the professional class. Everyone gets what they deserve, and what they deserve is defined by how they did in school. So, you know, you're worried about inequality? Well, the only solution is to go to a really top-ranked university, right? So you look at that farmer out in Missouri watching his way of life blow away in the August wind, and they say, dude, you needed to go to MIT or something. You know, that's the answer. Folks, this is not, you see what I'm getting at? This is not a philosophy for tackling inequality or reducing inequality. This is a philosophy for rationalizing inequality, right? It's always your own fault. It relentlessly pushes the blame back onto you as an individual. The reason your life sucks is because you didn't get a gold star from your teacher in kindergarten. Or you didn't finish high school. Or maybe you did finish high school, and maybe you even went to college, but you didn't go to a good school, right? And maybe you did go to a good school, but you didn't study the right subject. You didn't study STEM or whatever the hell it is that they're pushing now. Or maybe you did study STEM, and 20 years from now, that will look like a stupid mistake too, you know? No one knows. But the idea, you've read Tom Friedman, right, in the New York Times. Endlessly, relentlessly push the blame back onto you as an individual. That's what inequality is. It is your own goddamn fault. What I am describing is a philosophy of winners. And the Democratic Party, the reason people hate the Democratic Party is it is a party of winners. That is our left party in this stupid system in this country today, a party of the new economy winners. I mean, there's a reason that poor Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign was all about her resume. And her resume looked pretty good. It was all about her credentials, and they were awesome. And she thought that she could win by running as a hyper-competent expert. Friends both with Wall Street bankers and the more enlightened sort of graduate students. The Democrats' unofficial slogan in this last go-round was, "America is already great." I mean, it's like something you would see inscribed on a country club logo somewhere, folks. It's not just, it's complacency, but it's not just complacency. This is complacency on wheels. This is a kind of militant complacency. And of course, Hillary did really well with affluent suburban Republicans, and she did really well in prosperous college towns. And you look at a map of Missouri in the last go-round, and she won St. Louis and KC and Columbia, and that's it. And you look at all these other Midwestern states, and it's always the same. She wins the big cities, the college town, and folks, it is a wipeout everywhere else you go. And this is happening all over the world. Everywhere you go in the Western world, parties of the left are dispirited, and they don't know what they believe in any longer, and they spin the same stupid fantasies of globalization and innovation and the creative class. And everywhere you go, working people are abandoning these parties by the millions. And they are lining up with demagogues like Marine Le Pen and Donald Trump, who at least pretend to understand the situation they're in.